without compensation. The purposes of the commission are to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the city through the preservation and protection of buildings, sites, structures, and areas and districts of historic significance and interest through the preservation and enhancement of local historic, architectural, archaeological, and aesthetic heritage found in the city through the maintenance of the distinctive character of the city's historic districts and through the promotion and enhancement of the city's historic and aesthetic attraction to tourists and visitors. At this point, I would like to ask the other commissioners to introduce themselves, and tonight we will start from my right and the audience left.
Keelan Adams.
Rob Hessee.
Carol King.
James Long.
Thank you very much. And we begin our proceeding this afternoon by reminding our other commissioners that the minutes of the September 12, 2023 meetings are enclosed in your package, and the chair will now entertain a motion for the adoption of those proceedings.
Do we have a quorum to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we have five.
There's five of us.
Is there a motion?
I'll move that we adopt the meetings as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second that we adopt the actions of the September 12, 2023 meeting. Is there any unreadiness? Any questions? All those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Motion carried. Thank you so much. As we proceed here tonight, we first of all like to begin with our Fall Sign Committee report. Rob Hessee, Mark Hall, and Keelan Adams.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. The committee came together and met, and we recommended the following addresses for signs: 125 North Lewis Street, 425 South Highland Court, 642 Felder Avenue, 1067 Magnolia Curve, and 3010 Cloverdale Road. All of these are contributing properties to their respective historic districts and have been approved for historic signs, or recommended
Okay.
to the board.
All right. Is there any comment that a person would like to make or any question that a person would love to ask?
Sean, are you clear on what they want on each sign?
I believe each one, I think there was one that had like something different, like a name of a house. So I can double check on the file for that.
Did you see that when you were in committee?
Yes,
Are y'all okay with that other name as opposed to just the district?
yes.
Okay, that's all we needed. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Paula, do we have any photographs?
Sean would have all of those over there.
Okay. Do we have any photographs of these properties?
So I included them in the sign committee's packet. I don't think they're attached to the agenda this evening.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any of the commissioners, other commissioners that is, have any questions or any other concerns that you would like to raise regarding these properties? We're so happy that we have 6 here. That's really impressive.
Is that because they have old signs and they want this new sign, or is it these people are brand new?
No, they're all brand new, and I would like to say 3 of them are in Old Cloverdale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm biased.
Okay. Is there a motion that we adopt a report from the Fall Sign Committee?
I move that we recommend the 5 submissions be granted permission for signs.
Okay. Does that have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any unreadiness? All those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Okay, motion carried. As I just mentioned, it is really impressive that we have 6 nominations here, and I would just like to encourage members of the audience and the citizens of Montgomery to feel free to nominate a structure, a building in your neighborhood for historic designation. And you can visit our website, the City of Montgomery, to find out, to learn the qualifications and who to contact if you believe that your property qualifies for historic designation. We ask that you do not hesitate and don't be shy, don't be bashful. We want to recognize your property. So just give us a call and let's start the conversation moving. Thank you so much. Inez Baskin Historic Marker has been installed at 3626 Mobile Highway. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Ms. Adams? Oh,
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you, I'm sorry.
No worries.
This piece is right in front of me here. Yes.
No worries. Yeah, this marker, some of the paperwork was done before I got here, but I completed the coordination with Parks and Recreation. And I wanted to ask, actually, Dr. Bailey, if you would be, I spoke with Mrs. Gant, I believe is her name.
Yes.
And wondering if you were involved with the unveiling ceremony. I think she said that you had spoken with her.
Yes, in fact, I would want to add, in the name of transparency, that I knew Inez Baskin in the sense that we've had several conversations over the years. I grew up in Centennial Hill, and where she worked was located at 910 Highland Avenue, and that's the block between Jackson Street and Sharp Street. That last brick building before you reach Sharp Street, that's where the Negro branch of the Montgomery Advertiser, Alabama Journal was located. But years later, Ms. Baskin and I had several conversations whenever we would meet, so I'm very familiar with her. And when I gave the presentation on September 10 last month for a program that was held at High and Jackson Street, I mentioned how significant Inez Baskin has been in history and why she qualifies significantly so for the role of a person not only in local and state history but in national history who should not be forgotten. So I've said to Ms. Gant that I'm more than happy to speak at that unveiling. Okay?
Dr. Bailey, what is the reasoning for the Mobile Highway? Is that where her house was?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and a relative lives in that house today.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was just a question, because that,
That's a good question.
because you're talking
Yes.
about something totally
Yes.
different. The other, is this an Alabama Historical Association, or was this a privately funded, or how did this come about?
Well, the way it was funded, we had multiple benefactors.
Okay.
I won't name them, but there were at least 5
Yeah, okay.
agencies, 3 agencies, and 2 members of the family
Okay.
who came together to honor the charges for the historical marker. So it wasn't just a single entity
Right.
that honored the charges or the assessment for this historical marker. At least 5.
Because John and I have been talking about establishing some sort of a historic marker process
Surely,
so that we'd have all this information,
surely.
like, where were they manufactured?
Yes.
Do they all look the same, or is there some consistency? And then apparently you did a lot of the research, and so that was,
Right. In fact, the recent historical markers I unveiled, in fact, specifically December 10, 2021 at Lincoln Cemetery, we unveiled 2 historical markers that day. And on May 16, 2021, the same year, we unveiled the Robert and Jeannie Grass historical
right,
marker on
right.
Dunbar Street. And what I did, I invited Scotty Kirkland, who works for the Alabama Department of Archives and History, as one of my speakers. And I asked him to speak along the line why historical markers matter. And in those presentations, he was very ably so in letting the audience know the process by which one went through to get a historical marker. And for those persons who were listening, one of the things that we try to do with those historical markers, on each side we try to limit the verbiage, the wording to at least 100 words.
Right.
I think it's 200 words, I'm sorry, 200 words.
Well, probably 100.
Yes, something along that line.
That's the basic.
Right, and then
panel,
that means
yeah.
the person has to get to
Right,
the point.
right.
You got to
Quick.
get to the point. And for years, the process took something like 4 months.
This is association, Alabama Historical Association?
Alabama Historical
Okay, so
Association.
they handle all the
Yes.
ordering and
That's right.
vendor, okay.
And in fact, the archives is now under the Alabama Historical Association in a sense. So when we order historical marker, Scotty Kirkland with the Archives and History is the contact person. And then it qualifies through the process with the Alabama Historical Association. And person who have read historical markers will know at the very bottom you have the Alabama Historical Association listed and the year the marker was unveiled. So you have those two items on those historical markers. But the point of the matter is we need that somewhere online where a person
Right.
can just
Right, exactly.
access that information and realize if whatever it is that person has in mind qualifies for a historical marker. In other words, do you really want a historical marker?
Well, and making sure that the facts are facts.
Yes.
That kind of thing. And my understanding is, Sean, that the markers that are historic districts should also go before ARB. What do you think?
Right, but they're typically these markers are placed on the public right-of-way,
Right.
so,
So they kind of need to be approved, period.
well, that's from my understanding, it's just approved at the staff level, like it's something that I handle.
Okay.
As far as citing it,
Right.
making sure
With
Parks and Rec
maintenance.
knows where to put it.
And then the city installs it.
Right.
Now, that's if they go through that particular process, but there probably could be other people who just, go out and do it themselves without going through that unless we have a particular
But they can't put it on right-of-way without approval from engineering.
right. But do they know that? That's-
They'll learn it or they'll get told.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I'm saying there. If we have some sort of a written process, you can go this route, or, this is the steps to do it, so.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And in addition to that, one of the steps in that process, if we are not just unveiling that historical marker in the middle of nowhere, the city has to come out and survey for gas
For
lines.
utilities, right?
Yes.
True, that's
To
true.
make certain that when they insert that pole into the ground,
Sure.
that it doesn't interfere with a gas line. That could be very dangerous.
Oh, sure.
If it were to
Especially
do
with
that.
There's all
Right.
of this new stuff too,
Yes. Right. And the other concern I have is that we want to make certain that everybody knows from point A to point Z what is involved in the process of getting a historical marker.
right.
And that's why
Exactly.
your suggestion regarding having that information online. They need to know who to contact, how long it takes, the whole 9 yards. In the early days when I was unveiling historical markers, the process took something like 4 months. And I'm being told now that the process can take up to 9 months.
And the price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The process of the price when I started unveiling historical marker was $2,500. And I understand now the price can go as high as $3,000.
Yeah, I think there's somewhat of a public misconception that if it's on a public right-of-way, that the municipality or the city paid for, or did it, that kind of thing. So that's also,
Okay.
Sort
But
of.
anyway, when we
Yeah.
put that information online,
Yeah.
we would
That's good.
I think, do the public a good service by outlining every aspect, every dimension of what is involved in that historical marker
The
process.
criteria. Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
And the thing is, I've heard people say we have enough historical markers in the city of Montgomery. We do have quite a few, but the point is we have a lot of history here in the city of Montgomery also. And anytime we find someone who is interested in local information and they think that that topic or that area deserves a historical marker, we want that person to step forward and let someone say it does or it does not, as opposed to just assuming that it does not have or does not qualify for a historical marker. Okay. Now, what do we need to do regarding your suggestion as the next step if we decide to put that online? What would you suggest?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Maybe just look and see what other people have done.
Surely.
Is there some sort of a document, Sean, that has been floating around that kind of got lost, that you know of? Not yet,
There's,
okay.
as far as I know, nothing public facing.
Okay.
I have a document, that I've been using, so perhaps we can try to
Sort of
adapt.
fine tune that, yeah?
Mhm.
Well, that's a good idea, okay.
Right.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you could send us that, we could just sort of look over it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Right. Now, let me just ask this one question. I'm reading here where it says the Inez Baskin historical marker has been installed at 3626 Mobile Highway. Can you just shine some light on that?
Yeah, so Parks and Recreation received the shipment from the manufacturer, and then they went out and installed it. So there's like a cover, a cloth or something cover over it, and so that's awaiting the unveiling ceremony, so that we can take that cover off and present it.
All right. Let me ask you this. Is that plastic cover or that cloth cover with the lock at the bottom?
I'm actually not sure what kind of cover. That's something I could ask
Surely.
Parks and Rec, but yeah, I'm not sure of
Right.
what material it's made of.
And for the person listening, the reason I'm asking that particular question anyway is that plastic covering, somebody can just pull it off. With the cloth covering with the lock at the bottom, no one can pull it off.
Protects it.
Right. And that is not taken off until the day that the marker has been unveiled. So when we see here written that it has been installed, we want the public to know that it means that it has been placed in the ground, not that it has been unveiled. We just want to clarify that. Okay.
Sure.
And do you have a date that it scheduled for unveiling?
I do not.
You do not? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay, good enough. Is there anything else you want to say about that historical marker and historical markers in general?
No, I think I'm okay. I will scan the document I have, and I can send that to you all via email.
Okay.
Regarding the
All right,
process.
appreciate it. But as we leave this topic, we just want to encourage the public to get involved, get engaged in the historical marker process. And as we said, don't hesitate to nominate something for a historical marker. And I'd just like to ask the other commissioners here, what is your favorite historical marker? For anyone who just want to talk on that right quickly. What is your favorite historical marker here in the city of Montgomery?
I couldn't tell you offhand. I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Can't tell.
Well, I know that there are several varieties of them.
Yes.
I know there's sort of what you're talking about, and then there's other people who have just gone out and bought them and
Right.
put them up themselves for a particular subject or event or person, that kind of thing. And that's sort of where I was going, is to more of the standardization of it.
Okay, all
But
right,
there are probably, a lot of interesting things that could be documented.
surely.
And I think that was at some point a process of, I know the association ones are inventoried.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find a list of, but I don't think we have one of markers in Montgomery.
Okay. I wanted to say this as we leave this topic. For anyone who wants to read the text on a historical marker, the historical markers for the entire state are on the internet, and you can just go to a given site on internet and read the text on any historical marker from Montgomery County or whatever the case might be. All right, any other question or comment regarding Inez Baskin historical marker? Yes, sir.
I have a question on the markers in general. How difficult would it be to either add to new markers and or retrofit old markers with, I forget what those little code things are, that you could
Oh,
take
right, QR codes.
a QR code,
That's a good question.
and it could be linked to a site either by land use or landmarks or maintained by somebody,
USGS.
and it could have more history on that with maybe photos and such, that you can just click with your phone and read it right there while you're at the marker.
I did that with a program in Boynton Beach. We installed historic markers throughout the city and included a QR code. And when people scanned the code, they were actually given audio information on the sites as well.
Oh,
I would say, though, it is a large job. Doing the QR codes isn't a problem. You can basically get stickers and put them on there. The bulk of the job is creating the content to put online. That's where the work really comes in. So yeah, it's a great thing to have. We've actually been discussing trying to get our web pages updated so they're clearer and everyone knows where everything is and everything has links to it. So it's certainly something that we have discussed. But it's creating the content for the QR codes that really takes the time to do.
yeah, with all the markers we have around here, that'd be a
Yeah.
full-time position, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Discussion about Cottage Hill Historic District boundary change by City Council.
I think it was Board Member Hessee that requested this be added to the agenda.
Sawyer.
Oh, that's correct, I'm sorry. It was a while ago. I was at the city council meeting last night. The mayor vetoed the ordinance that was presented by Ms. Johnson, and then eventually it ended up with them honoring the veto and not overturning the veto. So as it stands now, back to square one. I did ask that this be added to the agenda, not knowing whether we would have the veto or if it would be overturned or not overturned. There was a lot of information that went back and forth last night at the city council meeting, and I would encourage everyone to watch the YouTube video, because there were some things that were said at the work session meeting that were not repeated at the regular meeting, and in a few incidents maybe even contradicted from the work session meeting to the regular meeting.
For the sake of the audience and even some other commissioners, would you all like to just give the background to what is really driving this discussion?
Well, 2 commission meetings ago, an item was added at the end of the agenda to amend the Cottage Hill Historic District boundaries so that the local district reflected the National Register district boundaries, because there is a slight difference in the 2 boundaries. At that meeting, the motion was made and it was approved. After the meeting, some questions were raised as to number 1, was a valid process followed? And the other issue was that amending the boundaries to match the National Register district, an area at the northwest and an area at the northeast of the district would be removed, and additional properties would be added to the district along the south side of Clayton. So that's ultimately what the amendment would do. Apparently this issue came up in the past, and the city attorney stated that the process that should be followed is the district should be resurveyed. A recommendation should come to you from staff for this board to make a recommendation on to City Council, and the final decision would be made by City Council. So that's the process that we had determined or had been determined in the past should be followed. In other words, to amend the boundaries, the same process should be used for creating a historic district. A council member, I believe, feels that that process doesn't have to be followed, which was why it was brought up. So I think the issue is that there is no clearly defined process for theoretically amending the boundaries of a historic district. When I've been in that situation before and in other positions, the determination has always been the same process should be followed for when you're creating a historic district, and I believe that's the opinion of the City Attorney's Office as well. So last night, yes, the mayoral veto was upheld, so we're back to square one. But I'm not exactly sure what is going to happen next. And that's really where we are at the moment. I think the main reason for the National Register district boundaries being different from the local register are that a number of properties were not 50 years old at the time when the National Register boundary was created. So these properties weren't actually included. But our opinion is if there's any amendment to the boundaries, the process should be followed, whereby the district is surveyed, a report is prepared for this board makes a recommendation to City Council.
Okay, any question, comments regarding? Yes.
Well, I know from, not necessarily Cottage Hill, because it was done it was the first large district, but I know when it came down to some of the other districts, Garden District and Old Cloverdale, the reason for the line change was this very stringent local requirements of the 75% of the property owners. And National Register was not so stringent. And so, in an effort to secure, and so that's why it fluctuates a little bit.
Yeah, there's no 75%.
It was originally.
Yeah, but from the areas that were cut out of the National Register, it certainly appeared that in the Northwest, some properties in question weren't even 50 years old when the district was created, which is why really you should be updating your historic district surveys once every 10 years or so. Is really
Right.
what should happen to stay
And then, of
on
course,
top
the annex came along almost 20 years later. The Goldwaite Street annex came along later, and then was,
Yeah.
until recently, was known as its own, in other words.
Yeah.
So
But it is an issue in a lot of municipalities because to update your surveys is a fairly large amount of work. But really your district should be updated fairly regularly to stay on top of it. In some cases that may mean removing properties, although the reason for the ARB is so that any alterations to properties are appropriate, so that you shouldn't really be removing from your historic district, but you can always add to them and you can always amend the number of contributing structures, because non-contributing structures theoretically can become contributing
Right.
as time goes on.
I think in some of that vacant property, like on the north end of the Garden District, north end, close to the interstate, and/or a lot of that north end of Cottage Hill, the empty lots, and knowing that they would soon hopefully become under some type of a development, the design review would be in place. And that is what happened along Clay Street, because there's several newer structures that were made to be compatible
Yeah.
throughout the 80s and 90s as that began to develop. So that, even though they were empty at some point in time, the design review helped maintain the streetscape.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, any other comment, question? Thank you very much. Let me just ask this one question. Is this the final chapter here?
For Cottage Hill,
Yes, this the final chapter. Is it done? Is it buried?
it stays as it is at the moment. I do not know if another attempt will be made to amend the boundaries and what process that will follow.
Okay.
I believe at the meeting, Councilwoman Johnson said that she was going to go back and meet with the,
Okay, speaking into the mic.
that she was going to go back and speak with the Cottage Hill residents on the subject. And I did not get the impression that she was finished with her wanting to at least remove the one property.
Right. In fact, we had some representative from the Cottage Hill community to come and address us regarding their opposition to any change for that community. And as far as I know, that sentiment has not changed one bit.
No, sir, and last night, the Cottage Hill representative did make a statement that that the neighborhood is fine, happy, whatever. They like the process that's in place.
Okay.
They adhere to it. That's how they've grown and developed that neighborhood. They respect that process, both residential and commercial, and they are fine with the process as it is in place,
Surely,
the existing process.
surely.
Yeah, and I mean, it may be possible to actually put a process in place in the code for amending districts, so there's no doubt about it. In other words, there's a process in there for creating a district, but there is no process actually in the code for amending a district. But in my experience, if there's no process, you would just use the same process for creating a district. But we may want to consider actually putting a process for amending a district in the actual code so that it's clear. But that has not been mentioned, but it's certainly something that we could consider, bearing in mind that any amendment to the code will have to go to City Council for final approval. And once you open that up, they could make amendments of their own. So we could go forward with one process which could ultimately be amended at final reading.
I think we just recently, Paula, and you would know this, and Dr. Bailey, that we amended Powder Magazine.
Yes.
In the last 2 to 3 years since the Whitewater Park, we went back and amended.
And we followed the reverse process.
We did the same process. It came to us and we recommended to the city council, and they, took our recommendation, and it was to annex off some of that property.
Everything of the district except for the Powder Magazine building itself.
Right.
Was undesignated.
It was undesignated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on this point? All right. We have, with us this evening several guests, and I'd just like to ask if anyone would like to approach the microphone with some comments before we close out this evening. Yes, come right on. Just give us your name, and we know who you are, but for the sake of the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Collier Neely. I'm with the Landmarks Foundation. I was also in attendance last night. I've been keeping up very closely with the issue in Cottage Hill. As some of you know, that this thing has been going on for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years now. And I actually addressed you, I believe, at the very, very beginning of the map code question, just to let you know what was going on and give you an update there. Y'all have a unique position being the Historic Preservation Commission here in Montgomery. Montgomery's system of regulating historic districts and kind of carrying through the historic preservation process is a little bit unique to other places in the country where we have a preservation commission and an architectural review board. In other places, the preservation commission kind of does all of it. And having that kind of structure set up, y'all are really to be the policy-making wing of Montgomery's historic preservation policy. And that's why I think y'all sit in a unique position and a unique position to act here if you so see fit. But I'm really here to talk to you about how Landmarks Foundation and the Historic Preservation Commission can really improve our partnership. That's something that we've had, honestly, going back to the founding of the Historic Preservation Commission. Landmarks Foundation and our members and our founders were instrumental in creating the preservation ordinance in Montgomery, carrying through with the survey and designation of these historic districts, but also creating the Historic Preservation Commission, creating the Architectural Review Board, and making sure that that process is followed through for just about the last 50 years. So I have a question for you to start with. How can we, the Landmarks Foundation, better serve the Historic Preservation Commission in our partnership moving forward? I know, Dr. Bailey, you've asked me in the past to come and kind of present a State of the Union, if you will, on preservation in Montgomery. Is that something that you would consider moving forward with?
Certainly. Without hesitation, we would invite you to just come before us, get on our agenda, come before us, and just give an update on what Landmarks Foundation is doing, number one. And your second concern, how can we enhance the relationship that we could very easily both benefit from having an improved relationship between Historic Preservation Commission and Landmarks Foundation?
Yeah, I would actually ask you if you would put me on the agenda. That's something that I can plan for if it's the beginning of the year, end of the year, however you would like to do it. And as far as your agendas go, if you just tell me when to be here, I'll be here.
Surely. We meet the second Tuesday every month at 5:30 p.m. and we encourage your coming and just telling us what's going on.
Okay. Well, that's something we can work on. And the other thing, I think it's something that would improve the relationship, and that's not to say that the relationship at all is bad. We just together hosted the NAPC, the National Association for Preservation Commissions, and their CAMP program, which is an educational program for the Historic Preservation Commission, the ARB, any interested public and Landmarks staff and members as well. And I think it was well attended and, for the most part, well received. I really enjoyed it. So the thing that I would propose is 2 projects that we could follow through over the next year or so. The first one being working together to lay out a preservation plan for the city of Montgomery. I think that would help us in times like this to be a little bit more proactive and less reactive, but also line out priorities on issues like historic markers, key landmarks that we know that may be under threat, drawing out the process for how we want to designate and identify new potential historic districts, and then what are some of the priorities for the historic built environment here in Montgomery. So that's one thing that I would suggest that we do. And the other thing is that we work together, staff, Preservation Commission, Landmarks, to begin an annual Historic Preservation 101 class meant specifically for the elected officials and other staff persons within the city of Montgomery's bureaucracy. Something that obviously would need to be open to the public, but at the same time work together so that we can make sure that the city council, the Board of Adjustment, the Architectural Review Board, you yourselves, understand what the role of the Preservation Commission is, what the role of historic preservation is in the development, the continued development and growth of Montgomery, and the role that it can play. Because I think if you look at Cottage Hill by itself, just kind of taking the situation that we find ourselves in, you can see the benefits of locally designated districts just by looking around Cottage Hill. You can see places where there is a defined boundary because of that local district where development is happening inside the district and development has not happened outside the district. And they're literally across the street from each other. And I think that's very telling of the benefits of locally designated districts and the success of the process that Montgomery has in place at the moment. There's some places where we could definitely improve, and I think we can find those places and work with City Council to get that done. But at the same time, there's obvious benefits to this, and it's right there. And doing something, engaging the council, engaging other city staffers and other elected officials in the preservation process, including them in it, showing them how it works and what it is, I think they'll gain a better understanding in it and be allies moving forward and see the role that historic preservation plays in the grand scheme of things as we, kind of move our city forward and development happens and progress happens.
Okay. Any question anyone would like to ask Mr. Collier Neely before he takes his seat? Any question?
Oh, just wanted to make a comment that we do have a couple of new folks on the board itself, and then we've got 2 spots. So in other words, we have, lots of fresh faces, and so I think it is time to do a good one-on-one and just, if nothing else, sit down and read the ordinance from number 1 to number Z and go over it, as well as as well as the ARB too, because it all falls in there too, and just see exactly what it says, what it tells us to do, what it tells us we can't do. I mean, that kind of thing, so that we know exactly what we're doing. And then, as we've talked about before, work ahead on, because it is HPC's job to do the design guidelines as well, working with the ARB, but it's actually our job to create them, and then they, administer them through the public process.
Just to point out, the design guidelines are probably 90% done. I believe I did bring the first chapter to the boards, but I didn't receive any comments. And we are ready to start bringing the actual body of the texts to the boards now. But we do need feedback, because you very rarely get a chance to actually redo these design guidelines.
Did you send them to us?
Sorry? Well, I wanted to send them to the board members and bring them for discussion a chapter at a time.
Oh, okay.
Because I think
That's a good idea.
I think it's unfair giving you like 120 pages and saying...
No, a chapter at a time is good, so we really get it. Yeah.
And the plan is to get your comments back a chapter at a time and make those amendments, do it a chapter at a time, and then present the
good,
final document with all of your suggestions highlighted in the text. And hopefully, hopefully we can get them approved.
And hopefully maybe when we get two new folks too.
Yeah.
After the.
But I think the key to a successful partnership is number 1, education, because we can provide preservation plans, we can provide an amended ordinance, we can provide design guidelines, but if people don't really understand the core thing that it is that we do, it's very difficult for people to provide comment. So I really think education is step number 1. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to make whatever we do feasible. So if there is a preservation plan, work closely together and find out what the suggestions are and try and put practices in place that allows us to achieve something. I've seen a lot of preservation plans that go nowhere. Someone comes in with a nice big document and everyone looks at it and says, this is great, and then it sits in a shelf and nothing happens. So I think it's essential that, plans for the downtown, plans for the neighbourhoods, the preservation plan, they all stack up and tie in together so that people are absolutely aware that historic preservation is not here to prevent development, which a lot of people seem to have the impression it is. It's here to make sure that any development for the city is appropriate and in context, and all these plans work together for the betterment of the city as a whole. And Collier and I were discussing yesterday, and if you look at the most successful cities, not just in the state, not just in the country, not just in the world, but they all successfully balance historic preservation with new development. And that's exactly what I think Montgomery can achieve through a coordinated plan that has the support. But the essential thing is people need to understand what it is that we do to actually get there.
And the education would, in my mind, be first and foremost in a plan, saying, okay, here are the things that are essential for our community to know when it comes to historic preservation, where the historic assets are, what the value of them is, and how to use them. I think we're sitting in a really interesting spot right now where we've got 2 phenomenal plans between the 2040 Envision Plan, the master plan itself, then also the downtown action plan. which really lays out in very clear steps on here are things that need to be done, and that plan is being played out in front of our eyes, whether you see it or not, it's happening. And it's a good opportunity for the preservation community to come together and put put a plan together that is informed by those two documents, that also provides guidelines or guiding light, if you will, for the preservation community to find those priorities. One of which is absolutely education. And that's why we started several years ago the Preservation Leadership Seminar, to at least put into play, okay, here's what this does, here's some processes, here are historic assets that are important to think about when we're thinking about historic buildings and historic properties in Montgomery. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and again, based on that, I think that would allow us to at least start looking into creating more historic districts and designating individual sites. We do have one that potentially we've been asked about maybe moving ahead with. We've not received the official request yet, but there hasn't been a new district for what, 20 years or
25
something?
years.
And you know, for a city like Montgomery, you know, these districts are all around us, but we need to get the residents' support to actually move ahead with it, because there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. There's a lot of rumours get started, and a lot of that is because people just don't know how successful historic districts can actually be.
And that's a place where the Landmarks Foundation can come in, where we're seeing an issue, and Landmarks, working with historic neighborhoods, can sit down with folks who are interested in new districts and educate them and walk them through. Have the Preservation Commission as a part of that conversation. And so there's just another example.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the historic markers, you know, it seems like there's 15 different programs that do historic markers. The three that really come off the top of my head are the Alabama Historical Association, the Alabama Historical Commission, and the Black Heritage Council. The AHC and the Black Heritage Council are related to each other, but they are different marker programs. The AHC actually just released, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago now, a really great online, publicly accessible GIS map that shows where National Register districts are, where Alabama Register districts are, where, you know, National Historic Landmarks are, but they also include surveyed districts as well as their historic marker program, both the AHC and the Black Heritage Council. That's something that we can work with them to receive that data, put it into our own process and our own programs. But there's a plethora of opportunity for historic markers as well. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that people need to know. And right now, the Landmarks Foundation is focused on making sure that people see that stuff and telling the story the best way that we can. And through that is working with y'all the best that we can to make sure that we're on the same page. I talk with Warren probably weekly. Sean just hasn't figured out that I'm about to start calling him weekly. And so we're out there, we're watching, we're working with the historic neighborhoods as well. And so we just appreciate y'all's work and the partnership that we have right now. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
I have
And
a
just-
question.
Hold
for you.
on just 1 second. Is there any question, yes?
Yes. First of all, I just want to say that I've attended the leadership classes and highly recommend them to everyone on the board. They're very informative. The online training that Land Services has offered us, I've participated, I think, in all of them that have been sent, and I've always gotten something out of each one of those. So I really appreciate the maintenance training that's offered to the board members, and encourage the board members to participate.
Tomorrow's real estate.
I do have a question. When you reach out for the leadership classes, are you reaching out to South Hall Association, McGee Estates Association, and Del Reyta? I mean, those are three that come to my head that would be possibly qualifying for the next historic districts.
Yeah, so when last year we did a focus on mid-century modern architecture, we reached
Right.
out to those organizations and at least tried to find somebody in those neighborhoods that we knew that could get the word out.
Okay. Because I think it's important to reach out to the neighborhood associations prior to them becoming, so that their leadership is educated, so they can then turn around and hopefully pass good information to
Yeah.
to
Well-
other neighbors as well.
And that kind of leads to the conversation about revival of the Historic Neighborhoods Coalition that did exist briefly for a second, kind of under the auspices of the Landmarks Foundation, and whether or not we've called it that, we've pretty much maintained and operated that, especially when it comes to preservation issues popping up in the neighborhoods. But that's something that we can offline have a conversation about reviving. Yeah.
And I think just to bring to the board's attention, this isn't just new districts. We should be resurveying our existing districts as well. So that's certainly something that we want to do, because districts change over time. Some things become more important, some things become less important. Boundaries can change. And one of the other things that we did recently with the Cloverdale Idlewild Association, we went to their HOA meeting. They turned up with a list of 8 properties that were vacant, hadn't been kept up well, yards had deteriorated, and basically with it, one of the advantages of being in a district is you have us here as staff that can address these issues. And within 3 or 4 days, Sean had issued basically violation letters to every single one of the properties. So, you know, in that short space of time, the neighbourhood association raised their concerns and we addressed it, and we're going to keep following up in these. If people don't address the violations, they'll get another letter, and ultimately they will be cited. So we're here to help do all these things with the existing neighbourhoods. So please do bring your concerns to us, and we will act on them and quickly.
Okay.
Another piece of network is that there is a new director for neighborhood services, the City of Montgomery's Neighborhood Services, which is John Dow. And neighborhood services, you know, is sort of it began as a historic neighborhood coalition, but it grew into all neighborhoods, got kind of a networking type of situation. And he is very tuned into the historic neighborhoods as well, and he's somebody we need to start bringing to this plate.
Yeah, and one of the other things we're doing is we have the provision to cite people for demolition by neglect. So if you're in a historic neighbourhood and you feel someone's deliberately leaving doors and windows open to allow the property to deteriorate, we have the ability to cite them for effectively by demolition by neglect, and apparently that hasn't really been done before.
Right.
So we are going to have a meeting with Code to find out the process that we should be following. In other words, do we work together? Do we work on our own? How can we start moving ahead with this process of stopping properties deteriorating before people say, oh, I have to tear it down? Because, you know, I've seen how that can go, and you really don't want to get yourself in that situation, because at the moment there isn't a huge amount of new development threatening historic districts, but I've seen in South Florida how that can suddenly happen overnight, and all of a sudden people are buying up cheap properties to tear them down and build something. So we're actively following up in a process and how we can enforce demolition by neglect.
Now, is that just for historic districts or anywhere?
That's, I believe, just for historic districts. People do have to keep their house up to standards so that they don't get a code violation. But demolition by neglect puts it's an additional tool we can use in historic districts.
Well, what comes to mind is property on East Fairview, commercial property that's left to 3 walls at this point.
Yeah.
The roof and interior, everything's been removed.
These are the commercial properties in the
Yes.
entertainment. Yeah,
They lie between Cloverdale, Idlewild, and Old Cloverdale, and they're not in a historic district, and it's certainly demolition by neglect, or it appears to be.
I can't really say anything about it just now, but just give us a little bit of time. I can't really say anything about it just now, but that may possibly be changing in the near future.
Great.
Okay. Any other question or comment? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nealon, we look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have another guest with us this evening. Would you like to approach the microphone and say 1 or 2 words? You will not? Okay. Well, always feel free to come back. Okay. Is there anything else from any other commissioners? You got anything else you would like to say? Mr. Adams, Mr. Rose, any other comments that you all would like to make before we leave here this afternoon?
No, we would just encourage people to, you know, keep us in the loop in your districts,
Thank you.
keep us informed on what's going on, let us know of any issues, and, you know, let's start trying to get more designations under our belt. There are certainly a lot of properties out there that are eligible.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say to our viewers and now other commissioners that we are just not concerned with buildings and sites. If you know someone who has a videotape with historic significance or whatever the case may be, we want to encourage those persons to bring those items to our attention. We don't want anything to slip through the cracks. So ask us if we're interested as opposed to assuming that we are not. With that being said, we'd like to thank Mr. Mike Mann for handling control for us this afternoon, Mr. Warren Adams, Mr. Sean Rose, Ms. Paula Ways, Ms. Chandra Anderson, our new person on the block. Look forward to a long-term working relationship with you. With that being said, this meeting is now adjourned.